as Barbara said, Nelson Mandela made his transition, 95 years old. What an extraordinary life. Somebody else just, I decided not to mention this, but I'm going to anyway because of your song clip. One of our colleagues in ministry passed also recently in the last few days. Her name is Reverend Joan Gia. She was a pioneer in our movement. She and her husband James founded the church in Temecula, California. Retired to North Carolina to be with family, and the interesting thing that causes me to do that, Cliff, is that 20 years ago she had cancer, and they said she had a very short time to live. And she proved them wrong and lived a good another 20 years and just now made her transition. And just wanted to honor her name. I don't have a picture, couldn't find one, but just know that there are people doing amazing things out there all the time in this movement. And I want to talk about Mandela. There are times in our lives when we have these benchmarks of someone coming or going or doing something so extraordinary, and not that dying is extraordinary, but something we're all going to do. Probably have done infinite numbers of times. It was the way this man lived that is so extraordinary to me. And anyone would define Nelson Mandela as a great presence in the world. Which brought to mind this whole idea of what is greatness? How do we define greatness? Where do we find greatness? What does it look like? And that's what I wanted to talk about this morning. And I'm going to weave Mandela's story through these different elements that I believe are essential. They're the essence of greatness. The idea that someone is great does not necessarily mean that the hardships they have faced were that exclusive. You know, Nelson Mandela was in prison for almost 27 years. Lots of people have gone to prison for 27 years or longer. It's not that that he had shown up there undeserving. Frankly, it is true he broke the law of the country he lived in. He didn't agree with the law. And he did what he thought was right in the moment, and they recognized that he had broken the law, and they put him in jail. They put him in prison. Right or wrong, that's what happened. But what came out of that is extraordinary. So I've got 4 elements for you that I want to go through today and talk about. 4 elements of anyone that we could know that has greatness, experiencing, expressing through them. These 4 elements would be present. And the first one is a commitment to a vision. Now, if you know the story of South Africa, they practiced a thing called apartheid. That started back in the middle of the last century. They named it. They said, this is the way we're structuring our society. Well, it's the white people that said that, the ones that had come from Europe to mine the great wealth of that part of Africa. And they decided that there were 2 classes of people, the white people and the native Aboriginal people of South Africa. And they saw them as very separate. And that's the way they wanted to do that. And for decades they did. But people like Nelson Mandela, not only Nelson Mandela, but many people said, this doesn't work. This is not appropriate. But I tell you what, moving away from an idea that you don't agree with is not a vision. So what happened is that Nelson Mandela had to create a vision out of that. So what is a vision? Jonathan Swift, the man that wrote Gulliver's Travels, says that a vision is the ability to see things invisible. You've got to actually see something. It's not about getting rid of something. It's about seeing something. And that's where the vision comes in. So you have to start creating this idea of something that will replace the thing you don't want. Not wanting something isn't a vision. That's not where he started. Well, all that Mandela knew in the early part of his life was that he wanted to get rid of apartheid. And he wanted to get rid of this oppressive group of people that were holding on to that idea. He went to law school. He learned the law of the land. And he attempted to apply it, but he realized at some point that that wasn't in itself working, so he had to do other things. And they were some pretty radical things. And the people that were in charge arrested him and convicted him and put him in prison. Well, how does that relate to a vision? Well, it gave him time to think about a vision. It gave him time to recreate himself. He had to figure out what it was that he wanted to have in South Africa, not what he didn't want to have. So that was the work that he embarked upon. We often settle for the way things are in our lives, or we try to work with the way things are. But if we really want to create absolute and honest change in the world, we have to step outside of the way things are into something greater, into the idea that just because something is right in front of us the way it is, that doesn't mean it's right for us. The chances of those two ideas merging is very rare. Shockingly rare is my little example usually. The idea that there is something else going on, that there is a possibility of something greater than any individual, but yet something that would take an individual or a group of individuals to turn into a reality. That's a vision. You have a vision in your life. There's something there that doesn't set with the idea of the way things are. There's something different for you to achieve, or you to know, or you to create in your life. And although it may not be your life to change the entire world, by changing your life, you are changing the entire world. You're changing the model that we live by. So what is it in you that is the vision that calls you to do something outside of the way things are now? I ask you that this morning. The commitment to vision it plays on many levels, and I just wanted to give you some ideas of how that would look possibly in a sports analogy. Let me throw some sports people out to you. Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest prize fighters of all time, was once asked by a reporter how many sit-ups he could do. His answer was, I don't know. I don't start counting until it really hurts. Ooh, think about that. Those that were easy didn't matter. That wasn't part of his vision. His vision wasn't about doing those at the beginning. Once it really started hurting, now he's going to count and see what he can do so he can measure what he's done. Arnold Schwarzenegger, I know. Not the greatest husband in the world, maybe not the greatest politician in the world, but certainly the greatest bodybuilder to ever live. Actually, he lived in Austria as a young man. When he was 18, he was drafted into the Austrian army. That's because every 18-year-old was. It wasn't optional. But he went AWOL so that he could go down to Germany and compete in the Mr. Europe, Junior Europe competition, and ended up in the brig for it. But out of his absolute certainty that this was his path and his thing to do, he ended up being named Mr. Olympia, the highest standard, the highest title in bodybuilding, 7 times. He was going to do whatever it took. The greatest, some say the greatest basketball player of all time, Michael Jordan, said, in order to excel, you must be completely dedicated to your chosen sport. You must be completely dedicated to it. And that would apply beyond sport. If you have something to do in the world, you have to be absolutely dedicated to it. It has to be something that lives in you every day, that is present as part of you every day. That's what's important. That's what a vision is about. Greatness is only achieved through discipline, focus, and commitment to a vision. That's the only way it happens. We can dream all we want. Dreaming is lovely. Having a dream is a beautiful idea. But if you're not committed to the outcome of that dream, of that vision, you can't have it. And you're going to be left in that wanting, which does not serve you, nor does it serve the world. So our first look is at a commitment to a vision. The second one is to self-awareness. Self-awareness. Well, yeah, you have to know who you are. If you want to achieve something in life, you can't think that you can't do it. You can't think that it's unachievable. You have to have a sense of who you are. And I can't think of a better philosophy to embrace than the science of mind for getting who you are. Oh my God, every time you come in here, we remind you you're God. You need more than that? I don't know where you're going to get it. But if you believe that at the point of you dwells the absolute creative essence of the universe, then when you see something that is to be achieved, you have to accept within yourself, if you're embracing this philosophy, you have to accept that you can be the one that can bring it forth. You have to believe in yourself. There's no sense in not. And it's not only in yourself, but you also have to believe in this idea of moving forward with it. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. Most people that go to prison for a long time like that have a lot of residual stuff around it. But when he was out and became the president of South Africa and asked by Oprah Winfrey how he coped with that, he explained that that was the most important time of his life. That was his time to be with himself. That was his time to self-reflect and to understand the difference between what he had tried to do going into prison and what he would try to do coming out. See, going into prison, he went in as a lawyer and a rebel. He came out as a leader. That was his choice. That was his way, because he had a vision and he had to implement it. And it would no longer work for him to be that rebel, to be that one that was going to war. He had to figure out how to reassess this in a way within himself so that he could change the way things were. That was the work. So how often do we do that in our lives, where we are so sure that this path we are on, that it's looking at the enemy, looking at the problem, looking at this thing that we have to go to war with, that we think that's the way to get where we want to get. It's never the way to get where we want to get. The way to get where we want to get is to change who we are and how we perceive that thing. That's exactly what Nelson Mandela did. He changed his understanding of the situation by changing who he was in the midst of all that. That's what did it. That's what made the difference. Well, I just need glasses these days because I got some great things to share with you. This idea of self-awareness is bringing together what you can do and what you know. And what you must know is who you are. That is the most important thing to know under every circumstance, so that you can reframe the situation, because by reframing it, you take complete control of it. When you can see it in different terms and create it in a way that you can influence it, now you're really doing something. If you think it's too big for you, if your assessment of yourself is that I'm small and it's big, you can't do it. But people like Nelson Mandela show us that any of us can do it. We can do whatever we set our minds to. If it's important enough to do, we can do it. The third idea is called continuous improvement or continuous progress. Either way you want to look at it, it still works. The idea of improvement is that what you're doing is you're looking and monitoring and measuring how you're improving, how you're progressing along this path of creating a change that you want to create. It's incredibly important to be paying attention. I mean, so many of us, we bull our way through life and we demand change and we get all that stuff, all that energy and stuff going on to try to create the outcome that we want, but we never kind of look at where we are and say, okay, that's where I am today. There's good things in there and there's stuff that you have to look at and look at differently in there. Here's an interesting fact. Sociologists say it takes, is it 100 or 10? No, 10,000 hours to become competent in any particular thing. 10,000 hours of focused on that thing to where you have actually achieved a level of success, a level of expertise. 10,000 hours. Remember how many hours they say you work in a week? Average working is 40 hours. That's a lot of weeks. That's a lot of life. Well, what about people that are just naturally great? Give me an example. Yeah, I know. It's a developed skill. Yes, it's a developed skill with self-awareness. No, not yet. Not yet. It's a developed skill with self-awareness and commitment to a vision, but it is a developed skill. Here's the example I want to give you for that. Mozart. He wrote his number 9. What was it called? Piano Concerto, number 9, when he was 21 years old. Oh, obviously that. You know how long you've been playing the piano? 21? 19 years. And how many piano concertos did he wrote right before he wrote number 9? 8. He had the hours in. He did the work. Sure, he was incredibly good at what he did, but he did it, and he did what was necessary to get to that place. He had to do the work, just like all of us have to do the work to get where we want to go. And it's tough. It's tough because you've got that recliner and over 200 channels calling to you all the time. You know, that's a whole lot easier way to do it. Now let's look at this idea. Desire for change compared to comfort. Comfort will never get you there. And I'm not telling you to have a hard life. I'm telling you to have a meaningful life. I'm telling you to put your time into the thing that you've come here to do and to be the one you've come here to be. No matter who you are, no matter what your circumstances, you've come to bring something wonderful and meaningful and powerful to life. And that's the work. That's the work. So how strong is your desire to do something different? It doesn't come easy. It doesn't come natural. It's a lot of work. Don't think that Nelson Mandela, in all of his work, didn't have plenty of setbacks and failures, mistakes, doubts, and fears. He did. Plenty of things didn't work out like he wanted them to. But here's the thing. We are not defined by our setbacks and failures and all of those things that didn't work out. We are refined by how we deal with them. Yeah, that's the difference. So when you have a challenge in your life, when you know in your heart of hearts that you have something wonderful to bring to the world, whether it's writing a book or taking photographs or creating a song or whatever it is that you're doing, if you know that's in you and it's not quite where you want it to be, don't get mad about it. I get mad for a minute. And let it go. Because that's the thing that is honing your ability to get where you want to get. Nothing easy. There's nothing comfortable about being great. No one who has ever been great is ever going to tell you that what they have accomplished just came to them naturally. It always takes effort. It always takes energy. It always takes focus. It always takes that deep and abiding commitment to the outcome that you can see. That's the work that we come to do. Yeah. And the last of these four, actually, hold it up there at self-assessment, but I did have one other thing I wanted to share about this idea of achieving greatness. There are two reasons that we do it. One is that it tells us how we are progressing. That's a measurement. And it tells us what we are doing right and what we need to change. It does. So looking at it is really important. That conscious improvement idea, the idea of seeing where you are and being aware of that is essential to the mix. And the last one is, as it already says up there, self-assessment. Greatness and acceptance by others are not kindred spirits. If you're doing it for popularity's sake, let it go. Boy, am I learning that one in my life. Nelson Mandela had people that hated him. People that knew that he was going to ruin their lives, that he was going to change things and make their lives bad. He had plenty of enemies. He had plenty of people that wanted to see him dead. But that didn't matter. It's not that he was out to hurt anybody, because if you listen to what Barbara said, he wasn't. He was looking for equality. He wasn't looking to take anything from anyone, only to find a way to work together. That's where he came to eventually. And he was oppressed along the way. And he stood above that oppression. He stood above the game that was being played around him to do something extraordinary and meaningful. That was what he was called to do. So how do you do that? Well, you do it by being aware, on the next slide, of your circle of influence. All greatness involves a circle of influence. And how does that work? Well, how do you influence people that hate you? Here's a wonderful little saying that I've heard long ago from Barbara. I found it again this morning. They drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a bigger circle and took them in. And that's what Mandela did in South Africa. He drew a bigger circle. He reestablished the idea of how people related to one another in that country. And there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of upset. But you know what? South Africa is a much better place today. Much better. It's one of the great nations of the world. They have extraordinary resources that they draw out of the ground. And they work cooperatively together to support that community, that country, that society in being lifted up because of the work that Nelson Mandela did, first on himself, and then to create his vision in the world. And again, all of us can do that. All of us have a circle of influence. And it only serves us to make our circle of influence larger. How do you stop this? By judging people, by finding fault, by not seeing the presence of the divine in those around you that might disagree with you. But to look into their hearts and see that if they have some fear going on there, that's no reason that you can't see their divine presence. There's something greater to do. So you have to keep building upon that idea of who you can influence, not to control them, but to help them, help themselves make a better world. That's something we all can do. And that's something we should all be committed to do. Why not have a better world? Why not create something larger and greater and more beautiful than we've known before? What does that look like? We're still figuring it out. I think it's absolutely wonderful that we have this opportunity. We think we're so evolved as a species, and we're not. We're barely adolescent. We're just finding our way. But we have a couple of millennia of really starting to develop this idea of greatness and giving it to one another, letting it be our service to the world. Not for our egos. It has nothing to do with our egos. It has to do with that inner calling to do something wonderful in the world. Man, if you already do wonderful things in the world, keep it up. And we have these models that are global models. These people that stand forward as the greatest among the species of human beings. And I pulled 8 of them up this morning. I wanted you to see them. I'm wondering how many of those people you know. Let's start in the upper left-hand corner. Who is that gentleman? It's Abraham Lincoln. Anyone want to argue about his greatness? No, it has nothing to do with his assassination. If he had lived to be an old man, he would still be, in my mind, the greatest president to ever lead this nation. You know who that next one is? It's Marie Curie. The great scientist, the great physician, the one that helped change the whole idea of infection in the human body. The next one? Yes, the Mahatma, the one that brought independence and peace to the land of India. And the next one? That's Mary Baker Eddy. I just couldn't help but put her, I avoided all the original traditional spiritual, avatars, but I couldn't help but put Mary Baker Eddy in there because she really did show us that there's something within us that is so powerful that it's changing the world. It truly is. And down here? Yes, Dr. Einstein, a great thinker, and far beyond science, a great thinker of the human spirit. And the next? Dr. King, absolutely. The one that showed this country how to be nonviolent and to create something extraordinary. And the next one? Yes, the saint of compassion, the one that had helped infinite numbers of people in India find their way through with dignity. And the final one, of course, is President Mandela. These are some of my favorites, and there are many others, but I want you to know that there's no reason that you don't stand with these. There's no reason that I don't stand with these. Our job is to find within us a greatness to bring forward, because the world deserves that. It deserves it from us. Yeah. I have 2 quotes for you today. The first one is, great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. And the second, if you want to achieve greatness, stop asking permission. Get out there and do it. I love you so much. Thank you so much.